confused. Sorry. So sorry. Okay.
No problem. Okay. So hosting this session or chairing this session will be Dr. Peter Millington. If someone could stop sharing and allow me to share, that would be great, please. So we will have now, Dr. Peter Millington chairing this session. So I'd like to welcome Pete and introduce him. So he is a theoretical physicist and UK Research and Innovation Future Leaders Fellow based in the Particle Theory Group at the University of Manchester. So Pete specializes in quantum field theory and extended theories of gravity. And he's also been acting as chair for the Sustainable HEP Plus initiative since its inception, following the first Sustainable HEP workshop in 2021. So I will share the slide very quickly just to remind you that you are able to submit questions to the panel via the Slido link and this QR code that is visible. But I'll now pass over to Pete to start the session. Thanks, Pete.
Thanks very much, Hannah, and thanks for the nice introduction. And also thank you to all of the organizers for putting together this really nice conference and for the invitation to chair this panel. I think it's going to be really interesting discussions. So a huge thanks in advance also to all of our panel members. So what I'll do first is we'll just do a little bit of a round table. So I'll point to each of you in turn as you appear on my screen. And if you want to give a short introduction to yourself, a little bit of background about how you came to work in areas of sustainability, that would be fantastic. So André, you're the first on my screen.
Okay, no luck here. Thank you very much. Welcome to everyone. I'm André Schneider. Actually, I left the high energy physics world ages ago. You can see I'm a little bit gray haired. Actually, I left it in '93. And then through different side events, I came to sustainability through the World Economic Forum, where I was the chief operating officer for 9 years. And then I actually deepened that. I had for 3 years a consulting company in sustainable economics. And then I was vice president of the EPFL, also in charge of the Association of Sustainable Campuses through the leading universities. And then I've spent my last 8 years as a CEO of the Geneva Airport, working also on quite many sustainability programs. So you can see I like to go where it is complicated and not where it is easy. And now I'm officially retired, but I have still many tasks. I'm chairman of World Climate Foundation, where we actually work closely with the COPs and really about financing climate change. I'm working with the Imperial College on new market models to actually scale up and generate systemic change. And I'm still in aviation research in a regrouping of universities around aviation research and some other stuff. So thank you for having me. Old guy as I am, I seem to be almost double the age of most of the other participants.
Thanks, André. Laura, you're next on my screen.
Hello. Hello, everyone. So my name is Laura Bianchi. I'm 35 from Italy, currently living in Switzerland. So how my background is in mechanical engineering. So I was working at CERN during 5 years until 2020 as a mechanical engineer in the engineering department. But maybe we will speak more about this later on. My lifelong interest was nature, protection of nature, and climate environment in general. So I really wanted to shift my career into sustainability. So I get back to universities to specialize, and then I restarted my career after 5 years of working already as an intern. And then from there, I could grow and develop my career in sustainability, covering initially junior position inside a private company and industry. Then I switched for a couple of years in consultancy here in the French Switzerland, and then I got back to industry again, and the mechanical industry this time, still in Switzerland, for a group of machine tool industries, let's say. So there I am the sustainability officer, EHS and sustainability officer.
Thanks, Laura. Lia, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to be on this panel with so many people with diverse careers coming from HEP. It's really lovely. I'm relatively early on in my career. I got a master's in high energy physics in 2021, about 5 years ago. I was working on a project for Atlas, and yeah, I got into physics with the thought that hopefully I could get into renewable and nuclear energy originally, and it didn't pan out that way, but lots of lovely experiences along the way. But the idea of like contributing to sustainability or just working on more immediate problems that impact the lives of people stayed with me throughout my studies. And so after my studies and during, I started doing like science outreach to have that impact on people. I worked in that for a couple years, but I found the transition from technical to non-technical work not my preference. So I managed to land a position as a developer at GHGSat, which is a company that does greenhouse gas monitoring for oil and gas with satellites and aircraft. Yeah, and that's where I am now. So
thanks, Lia. James, you're next on my screen.
Hi, I'm James. I worked on Atlas for about 10 years, working on standard model measurements and some Higgs searches. And then since then, I've worked at the Alan Turing Institute, which is the UK's National Centre for Data Science and AI, where I'm currently leading our engineering work on environmental forecasting and sustainability.
Thanks, James. And Raluca, you are the last one on my list.
Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here and also hearing about everybody else from the panel. It is very impressive. I'm very happy to be part of the panel. So I come from a technical background, more specifically engineering. I studied computer science at the University of Manchester. And there actually, well, you are also from the University of Manchester. That's a nice coincidence. And from there, my first important position was at CERN, where I worked in the ALICE experiment. I was working on developing distributed computing systems for analysis in the ALICE collaboration. And afterwards, later, when I finished my fellowship, I started a new position at the United Nations Environmental Program, where I hold the position of Information Systems Officer. But why this position made me want to apply was that this means coordinating and developing digital platforms that support multilateral environmental agreements, so making environmental information more accessible to governments, researchers, and decision makers. So my transition was more from physics to sustainability, but really changing from supporting fundamental science to supporting international environmental governance. So trying to find something that has a, how can I say, a more direct societal impact. And that's what brought me here today.
Thanks very much, Raluca. So before we get started, I just wanted to remind everybody a little bit of a disclaimer. So the opinions voiced by the panelists here are their own and don't necessarily represent the views of their company or employer. So we've got a series of questions that we're gonna go through. I'll point to a few people to start with, but if you want to jump in, please just raise your hands and I'll come to you on the panel. And to our audience, please do feel free to add to the questions. We have a Slido going. The link was in Hannah's slide. I'm sure someone can also post it in the chat for us if the chat function's not working. Sorry. I'm sure that you'll be able to find the Slido link. Please do add questions. You can upvote them. So if there's a question that you particularly like, then please do let us know, and we'll do our best to get to that question. So the first one that I have for everybody, and you sort of, I think almost all of you started to touch on this in your introductions, is to ask you what your personal motivations were to switch careers or switch areas of focus in your careers and to go into sustainability. So I'm going to start with you, Raluca, since you had to go last on the introductions.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So the thing is, I wouldn't describe it as living science, but more applying similar technical skills on a different global challenge, which for me symbolize something that has more direct societal impact. So at CERN, for example, where I worked in the ALICE experiment, I enjoy working on the systems that enable scientific research and scientific recovery. But then I have always been aware and always been interested in knowing more about climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, for example. And these are very complex problems. And what I realized from a technical point of view is that these activities that want to improve the state that the world is in, let's say, need strong digital infrastructure. So because good policy, for example, environmental policy, depends on good information. Having it structured, having it well integrated, having it brought into a common place so that everybody can follow up with what is going on and what efforts can be put, let's say, together to don't have multiplications and so on and so forth. Then this came as a very big motivation for me. So I wanted to work on these issues that affect basically everyone.
Thanks, Raluca. Maybe James, do you want to
Sure, yeah. So kind of similar to Raluca, I would say, like, I haven't really left academia. I'm still working in a very academic adjacent institute. And yeah, I think one of the biggest things that I wanted was that sort of connection to real world impact, like feeling that the stuff that I was doing was actually like applicable to people's everyday lives, and maybe something, the kind of thing you can explain to your grandparents, like, what is it you do? And they're like, oh, I'm working on improving the weather forecast. Like, that's pretty easy to explain, a bit more easy than Higgs boson maybe. And yeah, I think maybe something that's slightly different about what I'm doing compared to some of the other people here is that my job isn't really specifically about sustainability. So I work as part of like a big engineering team, where the aim of the institute is to solve some sort of large societal problems, and we've grouped a load of those together into these different themes. So one theme is around national security, one theme's around health, and we have a theme around sustainability and the environment. And yeah, so obviously that was the thing that I was particularly interested in, and I was lucky enough to be able to move into that area as we sort of, as those themes developed. But yeah, like, I think the thing that I'm working on mainly at the moment is around improving our like forecasting and knowledge of environmental systems rather than specifically about sustainability. So yeah, slightly different from others maybe.
Thanks, James. So now I'll come to you, Laura. So you already started to talk a little bit about your motivations in your introduction, but maybe you want to expand on that.
Yeah, sure. So let's say that for me it was quite not easy, but clear at some point that I need to do this, because since I was a child, I had deep consciousness of the problems for the environment, pollution, waste, energy efficiency. So I was really touched as a kid about these issues. So my motivation is starting from really the origin, let's say. And so basically I had then this motivation was just fed growing up when I became also more conscious about the global let's say level of impact that our activities had on the planet. So when I became aware about the limits and the climate change, etc., everything fed a bit my motivation to have a positive impact in my life, to try to solve a bit this problem and be part of the solution, let's say. Then a bit like Lia, I went into mechanical engineering because I was told that it was generic enough to do a bit everything, and my purpose was then to go working in renewable energies. Then life changed a bit. I applied to CERN, and I was working there for 5 years. And I was really happy about that because I knew that I was working for a global organization for research, and I was thinking that research can have many positive impacts on society and on the environment also, even when we are not aware about them. So sometimes we have we do research, and then we have some positive outcomes that change our life, and it was not expected at the beginning. So we were researching for something else, and then we got a new technology or or we learned something new that changed in a positive way something else, and it was beneficial. So this for me, it was good, but not enough. So I was not really seeing the impacts of my activities there. So at some point I said, okay, now it's time. I didn't manage to go in the direction that I was aiming at the beginning. So I decided to gain a bit of basic knowledge on a few concepts of the career, and then I managed to change. So yes.
Thanks, Lara. I'll come to you next, Lia.
Yeah, I relate a lot to you, Laura, definitely, in terms of that desire just to have like a more immediate impact. And I was searching a way to do that via career change. The other thing, like, I was at the CERN summer student program. I was watching the postdoc of my group, just really stressed and really engaged in the problem, which is a beautiful passion. But then I had this thought, like, why, like, the intensity of the stress didn't match like the impact of the problem, and that feeling kind of accompanied me throughout my education. And so I was just looking for ways, like, how can I use these transferable skills elsewhere? Yeah.
Thanks, Lia. And André?
And I'll just say, sorry, I'll say as
course,
well,
yeah,
that I don't necessarily agree with that opinion now. I think you can make sustainable impact whatever career that you have, like James mentioned. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lia. André?
Yes, actually for me, this is on two levels. First of all, I need every 10 years at least to change the job to learn new things. So I went through professional music, then I was doing a PhD on parallel computing at the CERN. Then I was at IBM to build a consulting practice. I was at the World Economic Forum to be the CEO, and so on and so on. So I need that one because I'm a fundamentally curious person, and easily I get bored if I think I have done what I can do and things start to roll as normal. And then in parallel, since the late 90s, I've really got a deep interest into sustainability. I mean, I was confronted at the World Economic Forum, really clearly seeing that this is something we're struggling with, but especially also how to actually get the major actors, be it governments or economy, to actually react despite the fact that all the data and all the knowledge is here. I mean, it's not like we are discovering it today, but it still doesn't trigger action. And also how you can get actually finance to go in a way into that it really makes a difference. So, and now since I'm no more in an operational job, I'm concentrating almost uniquely on that. It's a little bit, to simply formulate it, how to go from compliance to impact. Stop just ticking boxes and actually generate impact. How can you actually get everyone to move to this approach?
Thanks, André. And given these multiple changes that you've made in your career, I think I'll ask the next question and come to you first. So what we wanted to know a little bit about was how all of you approached this change in your career, wherever you were coming from. How did you then make this move towards sustainability, and how easy or hard did you find that change? So I'll come to you first, Andre.
Okay. I had some time to think about it because, you know, at the beginning you do it a little bit out of not thinking much. It's just interesting. I think I have what I would call a Swiss clockworker approach. When I come in a new domain, I look at it like it is a Swiss mechanical watch, and I want to totally dismount it and remount it, because then I believe I know all the levers where I can make the differences and get things advancing. So it's really also about the curiosity to understand what are the processes, how does a company work, but how does a whole environment work, and how can you really move things in there. And this has served me quite well. And I have to say, I mean, there is a little bit of fear when I go into something new because no one is ever sure it works out well. Now, life has been quite good with me. It worked out quite well. But for me, it's also very much this enthusiasm and envy to learn new things and discover new people and start rebuild. It's a little bit like coming to a construction site and you have to build a new building. You have to come out how you do it, how you organize it. And then when it's built, yes, then I have to move on and go to the next place to build some other buildings.
Thanks, Andre. I'm going to come to you next, James, on this one, because you mentioned luck quite strongly in what you were saying before about making this transition. So how did that come about for you, and how did you make that change?
Yeah, so I guess like the job that I applied for was quite a generic like software engineering job, but specifically focused on research software engineering. So like taking the best ideas from research and trying to apply them to real world problems. But yeah, when I first joined the Engineering Institute, we had like a lot of different sort of like themes of work that we were taking part in. There was like public policy stuff for government. There was what was called like data science for science. A whole load of like different themes. And we've only recently, let's say 4 or 5 years ago, sort of coalesced around these bigger themes of defense and health, but national security and health, and forecasting and sustainability. And when that was happening, I guess I had the opportunity to kind of express a preference as to where I'd like to be working, and definitely like environment and sustainability was the one that I was most interested in. But yeah, it was, I guess, like certainly an element of luck that I was able to get the one to continue working on the thing that I found most interesting. Not to say that health is not interesting, but I think sustainability is probably the most pressing challenge in the world.
Thanks, James. And I guess now I'll come to you, Raluca, because I guess you're also coming from some computer science background. How did this change work for you?
Yes, so I was actually, the reason why I chose computer science as a degree from the very beginning was because I knew the skills were transferable. And maybe also as Andre, I'm also interested in so many things and learning in new domains. The common factor on all of this was the fact that I wanted to do something that brings a change, or is simply like important for science, for example, for health, for the world as a whole. From the technical point of view, for me, the transition was quite smooth because, well, the programming languages can differ, the software stack can change, but then the underlying skills are more or less the same. Now, when going to sustainability and environmental law, the biggest learning curve for me was not technical, but understanding the environmental policy landscape, those are the law details that are important in these international agreements. So I had to learn about multilateral environmental agreements, how UN organizations work, how conventions interact, and what kind of tools they use, and most importantly, what kind of information they need, the negotiators and the government. So a lot of time I spent asking questions, reading documentation, and simply just discussing with my colleagues who were environmental experts or law experts or environmental law experts, for example. So it was a challenge for me from this point of view because my skills were purely technical. Of course, I knew about sustainability and the climate, but I was not somebody who has expertise in this area. So there were a lot to learn. But I can say that discussing and collaborating with all the conventions around the world, it was very exciting. So I was more than happy to learn and discover more. And I'm sure there's going to be even more for me to learn, because I'm building software tools that are used for environmental agreements and environmental law. So I will need to learn even more from now on also.
Thanks, Raluca. And Lia, you also mentioned transferable skills and sort of moving skill sets across to a new domain. So maybe you want to say a little bit about how this change worked and how you found it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I took the approach of like, I'm going to do a clean break from particle physics and go into outreach, and I'll do a clean break from outreach and try and get myself into a more technical role where I can bring back the technical skills I developed in physics, improve them in the context of a new domain, and hopefully eventually work towards a mission that I'm actually passionate about. I'll say my answer is like very much like this is mostly for the early career researchers. Like get to know what the transferable skills you get from physics are. Find a way to transfer that into your resume. And how I did that was, I talked to a lot of people, like Raluca was saying, like asking them what their experiences are, what their thoughts are on different things. I did a lot of panel events, like when I was still associated with the university, which really helped give me like a broad sense of the landscape in like, scientists wanting to move their career in a more in more directly applicable problems, and also in like how to transfer into like science outreach, for example. So I did a lot of that. I reached out to the people on those panels if like there was something specific that I wanted to ask them. And then outside of like my actual work, I was I would do little projects and volunteering to try and get a little smidge of experience to get where I needed to go. So it was a lot of energy, it was a lot of work, but by listening and talking to people, I got a lot of information about what the lay of the land was, so I could position myself to get a position. And then, like James said, it also comes down to luck. And I guess the last thing I'll add is I found the people who were most willing to help me were other physicists who had made the transition. So talk to them. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lia. And so Laura, you also mentioned upskilling. So you went and studied environmental management, right, to help make this transfer. Is that right? So maybe you can comment a little bit more about how that worked for you.
Yeah, exactly. So for me, the time of change was really frustrating, honestly speaking, because some of you spoke about transferable skills. You were able to identify them and, let's say, more or less quickly adapt to working in sustainability. Me, I was like I was not in a good mood, so I could not identify my transferable skills. So it's like I dismounted the clock, and then I lost some pieces and I could not mount it. And I said, okay, I'm missing some pieces to rebuild my clock. So the reason is that I worked during 5 years in a very, very specific field, which was mechanical testing, thermophysical analysis for materials of the accelerator, sensors in optical fiber sensors, etc. So I spent maybe a couple of months trying to keep using those skills to go to work for companies. Aim was a bit, let's say, in the environmental or sustainability field. I didn't manage, so I said, okay, no, it's not. Maybe it's not the right way. I need to reinvent myself. And so I found this specialization course at the University of Padova in Italy. And I must say that it was really, really hard for me. It was 2020 to find a course on sustainability that was not greenwashing. Because I don't know if you ever look for a sustainability course to gain sustainability skills. I analyzed all the syllabus, and to my personal benchmark, it was a lot of greenwashing. And then I found this one, which was at its 18th edition. So it was already, I mean, in 2020, it means they started in 2000 to work to speak about sustainability at the university level. I liked it. I was lucky enough because I could keep living, let's say, in Switzerland and fully remote the course because there was the pandemic. Otherwise, I would have to move. And I was also lucky because I immediately found an internship which was also related to this specialization course. Basically, I did my final work, project work during the internship, and then I was hired and so on. And the course was about strategic environmental management, and there I could cover a lot of topics which are very important for enterprises today, but also for municipalities, so also for civil society. So it was really a good course, and I was lucky that I found it and I selected, and the professors were really skilled. We got also a lot of vocational, if you want, vocational training, certificates for ISO audits, which are also an aspect, let's say, of environmental management in the companies, in the private business. So yes, for me it was so very frustrating at the beginning. Then when I found this course, I was very happy. And then, let's say, I was lucky enough to find a place and gain these new skills and knowledge, and then I could grow and walk on my legs.
Thanks, Laura. So I think we have a question actually on the Slido, which I think is very relevant at this point, and I think collectively the panel should be able to come up with a good list. So what skills would you recommend that a physicist interested in a career in sustainability try to acquire? What do those coming from physics often lack? And maybe you just want to put a hand up or wave at me if you want to jump in. Otherwise, obviously, I'll pick on someone. Maybe André, do you want to start us off?
Okay, I think while I was at the EPFL, we did actually study on what employers are looking for by students coming from a university to actually be interesting to work on sustainability. And the first interesting thing which came back was they are not looking for specific sustainability skills, but for people who are actually capable of looking at the problems and understanding the challenges of the company, and actually then start from there to see what can be done. So it's much more, I would call it a little bit engineering or process re-engineering skills. And that was really, we've done it with several huge companies, and they said we don't want to hire a master or a PhD in sustainability, because sometimes, very often they do actually lack, and sorry if any one of you is that, it's no criticism, you're probably much better than what they said. But nevertheless, the challenge is very often that those people don't know how to connect it with the reality of the company. And that's also what I see in my actual work. Most companies are fully agreeing we need to fight against climate change. But when it goes down to actually define the processes, what needs to be done and how can it be done, and how can it be done that the company still stays competitive, makes money, and so on, then it becomes much more complicated. And I think what they're looking for is for And I'm not even sure whether that is an education, but for people who are interested, to not start with what they've learned in sustainability, but to start to learn what the company wants to do, and then actually go from there to help define what can be done to make it more sustainable.
Thanks, André. That's really interesting. James?
Yeah, just following on from what André said, I think that, yeah, like the most useful things you're going to be bringing to the field as a physicist are transferable skills. And I think it's often the case that when you've worked in an organization, like one of the CERN experiments, where everyone has a lot of the same baseline skills, you kind of undervalue those skills and you don't realize necessarily how useful the sort of like analytical skills and thinking and that kind of thing that you just do every day actually are to companies and organizations outside academia. So I think it's probably the most important thing you can do is to reframe some of the stuff that you take for granted and think about how that's useful to other people.
Thanks, James. Lia, I can see you nodding in agreement. So maybe you want to add a comment.
Yeah, I totally agree. The transferable skills that I've found the most useful are like the idea of like taking ownership of a problem, which I think that an graduate academic career gives you. And for me, the big one was like developing my coding skills. I think that opens like a lot of technical roles for me. And I would say it's not, so far, I haven't felt a lack in like training in specific sustainability, like knowledge domain. But I think a better approach is like find what you like to do, what you're good at doing, and then find a job that lets you do that, and then find the ways, like André said, to bring the sustainability into that and bring value to them. Like, yeah, there's loads of ways to make contributions to sustainability. I've technically got the quote unquote green job right now, but it's a lot more gray than you realize. Like, yes, like at my job, we detect methane plumes, and sometimes an operator will like fix that so it's not just raw methane venting to the atmosphere, but also they're buying our data so they can prove to other people that they are operating as cleanly as possible so they can survive the longest. Like it's so you don't need the green job. You need something you're good at doing, and the will to like find a way to make it work.
Thanks, Lia. Raluca, would you like to add anything?
Sure. My opinion is more or less similar, but indeed what I found with my experience at CERN, where I actually worked very closely with physicists as well, so I can talk from the point of view of a computer scientist, but also I saw some of the work that the researchers do. So the thing is, I think James also mentioned that there are a lot of skills that we don't realize we have when we are at a specific place of work. Because at CERN, basically, it's about solving complex problems or finding fresh new solutions, or in my case, solving complex technical systems or building them. So the only thing is to then see how you can transfer those into other disciplines such as sustainability, which is actually, well, if you have those skills, they are extremely useful because, as André said, the company or the organization where you are going to work at, they need you basically to be able to solve these complex problems and to plan a way of working forward. So I think, and also, usually when you work in international organizations in physics research, you collaborate with so many other institutes, maybe other countries, other organizations, which is already a skill that it's very useful when you go into sustainability, because there is not only one field that you focus on. Sustainability touches so many other areas, and if you know how to communicate with so many people from different disciplines, technically, non-technically, in a scientific way, in a administration way, in a finance, from a finance point of view, then it's a skill that will be very useful if you want to how can I say, make a contribution sustainability wise.
Thanks, Raluca. And I'll come to you next, Laura, but I'm going to rephrase the question ever so slightly, given what you said before. So you really did put this time in to upskill yourself in terms of sustainability, and our audience is made up of a very broad spectrum of career specialities, from particle physicists, from people who design and build detector and accelerator systems, to software engineers, computer scientists. So across that spectrum of people, what particular aspects of sustainability do you think would be useful to know, or what particular aspects of things that you did in terms of training and directly in sustainability did you find particularly useful or beneficial?
So let's see how I can answer to this one. So for me, let's say for my background and the position I have now, so I'm working in the private business, and I think I tend to agree with André that the main skills required by private businesses would be to be able to translate sustainability problems into solution inside the company, which means being able to communicate to many different stakeholders inside the company and understand what they do. So understanding of the organization and understanding of the sustainability regulatory framework, and be able to translate it and find a solution. Then the let's say from so the panel is really, I mean, the audience is really diverse in terms of background and work. What is important to understand is that there are different jobs which are related to sustainability. So you have to be able to see what is the field where you want to, what is your dream job inside the pool of sustainability job, to and then understand what are the gaps that you have to fill to go there. Because as I told you, I'm working in the as a sustainability officer in a private company. Whose aim is not, who is not providing services for sustainability, is a manufacturing company producing machine tools, but they have to comply with some sustainability problems, sustainability requirements. My job is to fulfill those requirements. And there are other jobs. I mean, you can work in the renewable energies, you can work for public administration to create the climate plan for the city that you administrate. You can work in the water treatment, waste treatment. You can also work for a company which is producing an innovative product that will not generate waste, or will be super efficient and change our way of living, etc. So for me, it's really, you have to understand where you would like to work, and then you will see which is the gap. And then there are several ways to find several ways to fill those gaps. What is important also, I think, is to be humble. So being ready to step back a bit for some time, and then just be strong enough, let's say, to restart a bit your career, maybe, and work hard to reach what you want.
Thanks, Laura. And yeah, I'll open that up to the rest of the panel and quote the question directly that's been posted in the Slido. So what do you think that people should know about regarding sustainability, maybe more broadly, maybe the way of thinking, the paradigm, the challenges? What things perhaps are, if you're coming from an analytical discipline, are you not necessarily prepared for when moving into the sustainability space? Feel free to jump in. Maybe André?
Okay, thank you. I was ready to jump in, but I didn't want to jump on anyone else's feet or whatever else. I think I mean, if you get hired for a sustainability-oriented job, then clearly you have to understand the context in which you're hired and what are the expectations. And there might actually be learning to be done about the target industry you're going to go to or the kind of task you're going to go to. I've never really been hired into a sustainability specific job. Sustainability became very quickly a major item. So I think it is important that you understand the big concepts around sustainability. I mean, also the certain legal frameworks, especially if you're going to work for a European company. I mean, it's important to understand them without becoming a super specialist, but at least that you know. And then I think it's really about problem solving and being able to talk to people, to actually dissect things, understand what's going, what's not going, to really get to something which is workable. So I would, how to say, I mean, and frankly, then when you're in the job, you will probably realize that you're missing parts. And then, you know, worlds like Coursera or others are just plenty of things you could go and learn, you know, and you can do it at your pace. So, for example, I started to dig really deep into AI now. So I did a whole bunch of Coursera classes. Now I have a computer science background and a mathematics background, which did help quite a lot. But I think it's in any case, getting a job will also, and your success in the job will also be a lot about your attitude, how you go about the job. Clearly, you need to have certain skills. I mean, if you're hired to be an accountant and you don't know what is accounting, it will not work. But I assume that will not be the case. But it will be the way how you can adapt to the culture of the company, how you can adapt to the way how to deal with people, how you can. I think it's much more about that. And that I must admit, I've never done classes. I learned it through my career with some real bad experiences also. So I got hit also. But so I think you need to be ready to go in with an open mind, have a good problem-solving capacity, and trying to dismount and yeah, understand a little bit about the company you're going in. What are its challenges? I mean, that is always very helpful. And then as you move on, it's really about then you will learn where you might probably have to deepen your knowledge a little bit on this or that because it's a specific hot point in what you have to do. And then I must say, compared to my youth, where frankly, if you couldn't buy a book to read it, or you couldn't go to the university to a specific class and you needed the time, it's Candyland today. I mean, I go on Coursera and I have time, but you can learn about almost anything and even get certified for it, frankly. Use it.
Thanks, Andre. So, well, just to pick up on one of the points, and I want to come to you, Raluca, is this point about working with lots of different people. And I know, Raluca, you've done a lot of work in terms of knowledge exchange with lots of different stakeholders. So how do you deal with those different stakeholders who might have very different priorities, be coming from a very different direction? How do you go about that?
Yes. So one thing that I realized is that while a lot of problems in the past, my previous jobs were almost purely technical, with somewhat of clear requests and clear solutions. Well, in this kind of circumstance, now the technical issue is not the only one that needs to be worked with. For example, it's more about connecting people and information and translating technical or scientific details to non-technical or non-scientific audiences, political audiences, law, and so on and so forth, which can be difficult because if you're going to explain some sort of, let's say, technology that is used for migrating information, environmental law information from the conventions, if you explain it to the technical team, that it's different from how you explain to environmental law experts or to somebody from the administration, and then you need to make sure that there's a common understanding of what is needed, and also instead of just proposing a solution, you need to explain how you are going to provide the service, what things are taken into consideration, and most importantly, listen very well to the scientific information or the legal information that the other kind of teams provide, because there are certain aspects of a technical tool, for example, from my point of view, that even if it's a straightforward solution for a software service, it is not as straightforward from the legal point of view. Therefore, you need many more, let's say, stages or many more approval kind of processes and layers of what needs to be done and what is needed and how it can be useful for let's say governments or negotiators. So one really needs to make an effort to, first of all, understand at least a little bit from all of the kind of disciplines and understand how to communicate what the service is about, or understand what they are asking a technical team, for example, to provide. So it's a lot of back and forth. You have to be ready for that. You have to be ready to learn, and also to kind of not teach, but explain certain things to other non-technical teams, and always be prepared to do that, and wait for maybe some time in between the emails, in between the teams. It takes some time. It's not very direct. It's not like sending a dictionary with this means that. So you have to have some patience, and you also have to learn to wait and listen so that you understand what is needed, basically.
Thanks, Raluca. And Lia, you mentioned the work that you did moving into outreach. So in terms of, do you want to comment a little bit more on sort of working with different stakeholders? I guess there it was sort of with the public.
Yeah, I think I agree with what Raluca says mostly, in like the patience, the finding common ground, and the listening to come up with, in the context of my job in outreach, I was working with like a lot of external partners to put on events for the public. Yeah, and that's what I found effective. In my current role, I'm working in a technical role, and I guess like I don't do a lot of that direct like interfacing with different stakeholders. I kind of need a team surrounding me, and then like there are other people who do like the more of the interfacing with the stakeholders while I'm dealing with the technical part. So I think like the key point there is like what Raluca said, and then if you're actually in the technical role, put yourself in a team who will help all together do that communication.
Thanks, Lia. Laura, would you like to comment on this?
Yeah, thank you. So about stakeholder, I tend to agree with what has been said. So it's really important to be able to listen and understand, to understand the needs, and then at the end it's all a compromise. So you need to be able to explain without going too much into the details, because otherwise you will lose your audience. And yeah, you really need to be able to understand the needs and to translate in a language that is understandable. And it's important to find the positive arguments, pro and cons. It's important to contextualize and you don't have to lose the main goal. So I think this is the most important thing. Again, in a private company, you get to speak with. Luckily, sustainability is a transversal topic inside a company, so you get to speak with finance, you get to speak with procurement, so supplier side, then you speak with the sales side for the request from the customers, and you have the overall company emissions, the product emissions. So you really get to speak with everybody, and everybody has his own requirements also inside the company. So it's important to translate. You have to be very flexible, let's say, how they say today.
Thanks, Laura. And James, you're working in a national institute. So what does this stakeholder question look like for you?
Yeah, this is an interesting one, and I think well, obviously I agree with the things that have already been said. I was going to say I think one mistake that I certainly made when I first joined the Turing Institute was thinking that the kinds of things that would persuade me are the things that would persuade other people. Like, thinking like, oh yeah, I want something that's really like, numerical or like graphical, like some kind of clear like number that I could look at and say like A is better than B. And a lot of people don't think that way, and that's not a convincing argument, and it really turns a lot of people off actually. And so yeah, I completely agree with what Laura said about like finding the right language to speak to people, thinking out what it is that they want, what they need, and how the thing that you think you ought to be doing will, together, to translate that into the words that they understand.
Thanks, James. And yeah, I think this maybe goes back to and speaks to one of the things that was mentioned earlier about, you may have been operating in a team where there's very common set of skills, and now you're moving in and working in much more interdisciplinary environments. So this, I guess, speaks to the differences when you go to move into these new spaces. So does anybody want to comment on really what's very different about the job that they do now compared to where they started in high energy physics, in software engineering for big science? What are those big changes? What are the big differences? What feels different about the jobs that you're doing now? Lia?
Yeah, so I'll speak for physics to software development and, academia to private industry. I help develop like issues, like GitLab issues, right? And then like each task has its own issue, and you solve that task with a merge request. It's very like tracked. And I think CERN does a bit of this, but yeah. And then the big thing that I notice is just the faster pace, and stopping the solution process when the solution is good enough, instead of that academic mindset of really getting down into every single detail. It's much more pragmatic, and it's a balance. Like my instinct is very much so to dive deeper than what is strictly required.
Thanks, Lia. André?
Yeah, I think my experience is also, in all my roles, I had to deal with a lot of different stakeholders, be it from neighbors to governments to people. And the big difference is when I was at the CERN, I was in the research group, so we knew exactly what we talked to each other. And what I really had to learn is storytelling, because you cannot just dump at the people your theory and stuff. You really have to think about how you make that to a story they can understand, which is compelling, which makes them follow you or go the same direction, and gives them enough indication that you will end up at the same place at the end, hopefully. And I think that is has become a more important part in my job over the years, to spend really time on thinking how to do the storytelling, even within the company as a CEO. You don't do anything on your own. You need your people follow you. And if they don't understand where the voyage goes and they don't feel emotionally engaged, it will be extremely difficult to get them. Whilst you have to tell them some boundaries. I mean, otherwise everyone will end up in another spot. So I think an important part, naturally, beyond listening to everyone, I mean, that's also very important, is as a leader, if you really want to give an impact to what your action is, you need to be able to do the right, to tell the story in a way that it really gives the people a vision where you want to go, gives them really the feeling they want to be part of this travel, and give them a certain delimitation so they can apply their innovation, their ideas, their capabilities in a quite large theme, but still assuring that you all end up at the same final space.
Thanks, André. Raluca, would you like to comment on this question? What things do you find different about your role now?
Definitely, there are several common things, and then there are also some things that are specifically different. Well, while I was working at CERN, I was focused on building software that help physicists analyze enormous data, experimental data. At UNE, now towards more to sustainability, the focus became much less about the scientific computation, heavy computation, and much more about connecting people, conventions, organizations, and most importantly, connecting information. So when I'm building something now, I have to take into consideration a large amount of rules and schemas and data coming from different sources that you wouldn't even maybe think that they are connected. For example, one of the things that are connected in the platform we are developing is the efforts that are made by conventions and governments around the world. Everything in connection to sustainable developmental goals, the international ones. So we are trying to bridge this connection. And why we are trying to do this? Because there's a lot of multiplication, also digital systems multiplication, but also physical efforts multiplications. And we need to bring all of this together in order to find a common ground and to reduce that multiplication and redundancy. Because if we put more resources, let's say, if we take those resources that are now used in multiplication and other things that are similar but specific to some other things, and they have common things but different things, we take all these resources that are scarce around, we bring them together, and then we use them to actually do other things that are important. Maybe a new convention, maybe a new policy. Although I cannot really speak from the policy point of view, I'm not an expert. But so the conclusion, the common thing is also that sustainability and sustainability efforts in organizations, I'm not really sure about the private companies themselves, but it's also kind of like a complex distributed system, which is what I was building at CERN, that needs international collaboration and lots of stakeholder coordination, and still, from my technical point of view, very strong technical skills, because a strong digital infrastructure helps conventions, helps teams to make informed decisions and plans and to follow up. So there are similar things, also different things. Yeah.
Thanks, Raluca. And a lot of what you were saying there was very outward and sort of future looking. So I'm going to come to you first, Laura. But what I wanted to ask next is really, what is that next step, be it in your career, or what do you think the next step is in terms of the things that you'd like to achieve in terms of sustainability and the role that you're doing now? So thinking positively and forward looking, what is it that you would like to achieve next, Laura?
Yeah, thank you for this $1 million question. So let's say that recently I've changed a lot. First from CERN to sustainability. Then within the last 5 years, let's say, when I was working in sustainability, I was first a junior specialist in a private company, then a consultant in a consultancy firm where we were working with the public municipalities. And then last year I changed again to work as a sustainability officer in a private company. So now for me, I'm really looking for a bit of stability, because I understand that I want to have a a bigger contribution inside my company now. So I need still a bit of time to know everybody inside the company. The company is quite, it's a group, so it's quite big, multinational. So there are different cultures, etc. So my hope now is really to strengthen my position inside the company, to at the same time strengthen the role of sustainability and the importance of sustainability inside the company. So this from the, let's say, from the professional point of view.
Yeah. Thanks, Laura. And I'll come to you next, James.
Yeah, so I think one of the biggest differences has been sort of like understanding who yeah, like who you're doing stuff for, really, and sort of like what the kind of like I guess the sort of the tangential things that are that are sustainability related within what you do. And as I mentioned before, I'm not working directly on solving sustainability problems. But one of the big sort of focuses of like sustainability work within like the research infrastructure community is around what's sort of so-called green HPC. So the idea of thinking like, we're running these big data centers, like training AI models, using a lot of computing power. Like, how can we do better at that through whether that's through better design of like the kinds of models and things we're using, like the better like times of day to run them in, whether it's like around like where you're running them, like sort of areas where like if you could target in the cloud, like where you're running, you could run in areas where more of the electricity generation is coming from renewable sources and things like that. So it doesn't feel like that's really directly solving sustainability problems, but the kind of like changes you can make to your everyday routine that reduce the carbon footprint of your work and have those kind of like incidental sustainability effects.
Thanks, James. Leo, how about for you?
I've lost track of what the question is, sorry.
No worries. So what is it that you hope to achieve going forwards? What's your next step?
I'm going to say that I don't know. I'm in a company right now where I'm working on these technical roles. I don't have a lot of like influence in stakeholders, but also I'm still very early in my career. So maybe it's just not reachable for me right now to get like that more position of power to make decisions. Also, I think I don't have any like sustainability course like Laura does, for example, to actually like really know what the right decision is. And I feel like the company that I'm in now, there's a lot of like there is some things that we do that genuinely helps to reduce emissions, but there's a lot of greenwashing in it. So truly, I don't know what's next, but I'm committed to figure it out and keep developing skills, and eventually one day hopefully find myself in a team where together we can work towards common goals.
Okay, fantastic. Maybe there's something that you can put your finger on as one of the things that you're most proud of so far in this trajectory that you're taking, Lia.
I'm definitely hard on myself, and so like frankly, like when I thought about this question prior to this panel, I was like, I personally haven't done a lot. I'm trying, I'm learning. I'm committed to figuring it out. That's about it.
Thanks,
I think
Lia.
that, and this is when I say that you can work on sustainability goals wherever you are, that's what I mean. Like the green job title doesn't necessarily mean that in your day-to-day work, you're going to see that connection between like what you're doing and the sustainability outcome. And so depending on where, maybe you find yourself in a good team where you can find that, and that would be amazing. But But if not, it's a lot of like pushing and looking for opportunity of like, where can I do this, and making sure you have the energy to actually push forward on an area that you think is promising. Yeah, it's hard.
And how about you, Laura?
I'm afraid that this time I didn't get the question, so please can you repeat?
What's the next step for you?
I already answered
Have you
this
already?
one.
I've got
Yeah,
myself
yeah.
confused now with the
No
question.
worries, no worries.
Raluca, you haven't answered this one yet, have you?
No, I haven't answered. So it is still not very certain for me, also maybe from a professional point of view, because there are different areas one could work with, or for example, switching to other similar projects to what I do now with different environmental conventions. Now, of course, sometimes it's hard to see the exact effect in a technical tool, in a software tool towards the real world. The thing that I want for sure to do in the future is to make this discussion about sustainability more involved into day-to-day life for me and for my colleagues and for my friends, regardless if in the future I would work on something else that is not really sustainability focused, to make it a common subject. For that also, I know that I need more knowledge. That's why I really respect Laura for actually going and getting a degree into sustainability, because there are some things that some people just don't want to be convinced that some things are reality, are what they are, and they are trying to bring some, let's say, other perspective that are wrong. But if you don't have the knowledge, then you don't know how to properly explain what you want to say, and so the discussion can have the opposite effect. So I want to learn more also what I know and discuss about in my day-to-day life. And if I have the opportunity to take part in outreach more, what I did, I went to COP events in Geneva. And we had two for the Minamata Convention, BRS Convention, Biological Diversity, where I actually outreach for our tool, which is called Informia. Basically, it's used by conventions and governments, so more organizational kind of focused, the tool. But it shows how a strong infrastructure of digital services can, because information is key, and not only information, only if it's robust and organized and real. First of all, and we all know there's so much information on the internet around the world. It's hard to make sense of it. So I believe digital tools that, or not even digital tools, any kind of initiative that helps the understanding of society as a whole, that we understand what is going on, then we know how to take action. And also, most importantly, because some things are actually coming from maybe private sector or political issues or perspectives and so on and so forth. Everybody needs to understand, but then step by step, make this a more important discussion.
Thanks, Raluca. And then I'll come to you, André, because to some extent you're sort of at the opposite end to what Lia was mentioning earlier. So you've sort of risen to those levels now. So what's the next step for you, or what's the proudest achievement that you have in the career that you've had so far?
I mean, on the proudest achievements, it's kind of difficult. I mean, it's always a good mix between some chance that you were actually asked to fulfill a job and the work you put in and the capability to convince. But I would say I was well treated by my career. On the future, I mean, even if I've now retired, I think what I have actually on one side the real big liberty that I can choose and pick what I want to do. And so for me, it's important really to fulfill roles where I can really generate impact now. I mean, I'm not, I probably don't know what retirement would be. I'm not someone just to sit down and do nothing. So I will continue to do things. But I hope that I will be able to choose and get also the opportunity to fulfill roles where I can help people to really, with their organization, generate impact. And perhaps the biggest change which I'm living now is I'm going away from being the guy who decides to the guy who coaches people who have to decide, which is a great experience. So it's actually also a great opportunity because it's to give back. It's one thing to just re-implement what you do as a career. It's another thing to help other people to perhaps not take the decision you would have taken, but really go further in their way. So that has become the role I have. So for me in the future, my hope is to being able to continue to generate impact and to be with people who are interested to be coached. Because if they're not interested to be coached, I think my role is for nothing. So that's and continue to be curious and learn new things.
Thanks, André. So we've got about 15 minutes left, I think. So we'll change pace ever so slightly away from the careers aspect, and we've got a few questions in the Slido, which are really looking back now at the sort of big science space, particle physics in particular. And one of the questions is, how do you think the wider circle you move in perceives major physics projects, so these large scale physics projects, things like the FCC? How are they perceived in the spaces that you work? Does anybody want to jump in on that?
Can you just quickly repeat? I mean,
yeah, sure.
It's getting hot where I'm sitting, so my my CPU is a little bit overheating, and there is no shower close.
So in the spaces that you operate in the companies that you work for, the industries that you work within, how are big science projects, things like the Future Circular Collider, these huge investments in research infrastructure, how are they perceived in the spaces that you operate? Are the people that you work with who maybe are not from a science background?
I will give it the first try. I think I mean, at the moment in Geneva, we have a huge debate about this new project. Because now actually the question comes up, how sustainable is actually such a project? And that becomes, I mean, I was actually at the CERN when we did the Monte Carlo simulations for the LHC. So, and then it was a big debate about where to get the money, and then the pension fund of the CERN employees had to help out. But today it's getting much more a debate also on sustainability. And I see a similar discussion also coming up with AI. So the impediment on research I see coming up more and more is how to find the right balance in there, because I think we need research. And I think when I was at the EPFL, I think we have a big recognition in the research world for those big research projects. Because I don't know if you recall, there was the Human Brain Project. There are projects you cannot do as one university or one professor. You need this collaboration. They work out more or less well. I mean, the CERN has somewhere positioned itself to make it more likely to work. Some others don't work that well, but I think that is important. But the challenge will be that the tools we need to use to push research even further will have a higher and higher impact on sustainability in general. And I think there will be a question to be asked: where is the balance? I mean, I know that in the Geneva region, all the green parties are screaming like crazy against this FCC project, which doesn't mean that it won't be done. But I think this is, and I think science needs also to find a good story or a good answer to that one, because today we're seeing already at the last COP that actually the quality or the recognition of the quality of science towards the climate debate was starting to be reduced. And if the science gets itself in this conundrum to be actually doing things which are not good for the environment and not really explaining why this is necessary and how they deal with it, it might actually undermine a lot the capacity of science to be our underlying North Star where we have to go.
Thanks, André. James?
So I guess I've got a couple of different answers to this question. So one is, obviously, like on a personal level, I still have a lot of friends who work in particle physics, and there's a lot of support for future experiments and for the FCC. Then I guess sort of in a professional context, I spend a lot of time interacting with people who have funded through, for instance, NERC, the Biology Research Council, and there's like a certain amount of maybe bitterness that SGFC and particle physics research in the UK seems to get large amounts of money in a way that they feel has maybe less scrutiny than for biology research. That's maybe not really rooted in reality. But I think from the sustainability perspective, the thing that people really worry about, where I'm working, like in the AI space, is about like this huge number of data centers and like the huge amount of sort of just like wasted energy producing like very like kind of useless AI stuff and trying to like deconvolve like the fact that we're trying to do something useful with AI that maybe will have some like beneficial effects from the fact that when people think of AI, they think of like, meme generation or like just like ChatGPT or something. And I think that's more of a thing that people worry about at the moment than particle physics, which maybe used to be an easy target in the past.
Thanks, James. And maybe Laura, you can comment on this. Also, coming from your background in environmental management, how do the spaces you operate in perceive these large science projects?
Yeah, so my experience is that there is a lot of knowledge gap because civil society, for a lot of people, it's difficult to understand the goal of CERN, the goal of physics research. So I also live in French Switzerland, so close to this big infrastructure, and I was also working with municipalities in the past, and there I could perceive some skepticism, a lot of questions around these installations. So it's there, and it's also, I think, less it to ask ourselves if the project is sustainable. Luckily, we are asking ourselves if the project is sustainable. It means that at least sustainability is perceived by the civil society, and it's a requirement. So we do environmental studies, etc. So this is, I think, is very good. But at the same time, I think we have to do a big effort to explain why we need such a project and what could be at the end on the balance you will have. There is a potential for research results that could counterbalance the environmental impact that we have by building such an infrastructure. And I believe that the discoveries we did with the CERN experiment fully counterbalance the excavation and the energy consumption, etc. I believe this is still not fully perceived by civil society. So, but this is just coming from my personal perspective. I don't know, actually, my colleague, I never had the chance to speak with them about this, but living here, I perceive this. So yeah, I think maybe there is the need to do more targeted communication to explain the benefits, use the example from CERN, and yeah, maybe this will be understood.
Thanks, Laura. And to pick up on that point about communication, and also to ask one or more of the questions that we got from the Slido. And I'll pass this to you, Lia and Raluca, given the knowledge exchange and outreach things that we talked about earlier. Should organizations raise more awareness regarding the importance of sustainability? What role is there more broadly of all industries to raise awareness of this issue, rather than lots of the aspects of greenwashing that we've talked about before? what's your perspective on the role that all industries can play in pushing forward the sustainability agenda in a proactive and meaningful way?
I could start. Well, definitely, I think it's essential to talk about sustainability, and the fact is, if larger or more known organizations and companies speak about this widely, then it becomes not, let's say, instead of this distant, not unclear thing that people speak about, it becomes a common discussion, like look, it's raining outside today. So if it becomes a common discussion, this means that whenever one is trying to build a let's say a building or a product or some sort of technology, then it's taken into consideration from the very beginning. So in addition to this speaking, if larger companies or even small companies, but small companies organization need also support to actually include the sustainability efforts and to, let's say, exemplify what this means, including sustainability at each and every step, because the work of example is very useful. If you can show an example, and then of course there are some trade-offs, there are some things that maybe one can sacrifice. But the fact that each effort, from the very smallest to the larger ones, it is essential. So definitely, any organization that can speak up on it and provide information in such a way that it's well understood by the civil society, by other companies, by other industries, because these things, sustainability has many ramifications. So it needs to be understood at the, let's say, bigger level.
Thanks, Raluca. Lia, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I think Raluca's answer really covered most of it. I think in the context of where I'm at, which is like a private company that is like a mid-stage startup, it's really interesting that there are like sustainability goals that we're going for, but it's like the challenges the company faces in terms of like gaining revenue and in terms of like reporting to the board really make it challenging to make that the primary focus. And I don't think that particularly has anything to do with my company in particular. It's like where we're in. I do think that the company, like, part of the mission of this company is about sustainability, which is great. And there's a beautiful story along with it that's inspiring. I think that's good. And there's people in the company who like are trying to use our data to do amazing things, which is great. And it all kind of melds together in one big effort. And I hope, and yeah, if we can use our position of power to like encourage change towards sustainable practices, then that's great. Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Lia. And so on that point of encouragement, we'll start to bring things to a close. I'll come to each of you in turn, and I was hoping that you could round things off with giving us all a soundbite, a single piece of advice, or a suggestion of a useful thing that particle physicists might go out and do. And this goes back to one of the questions in the chat that's a positive contribution rather than limiting negative contributions. So one sound bite each, and then maybe if there's something that you want to advertise, so an opportunity that you want to make the audience aware of, then by all means do let us know about that. So James, I'll start with you.
Well, a bit on the spot here, and I hadn't really thought about this until you said it. I guess maybe the soundbite is something around like like believe that you can do it. You know, like there are more you can get involved in you know making what you're doing every day more sustainable. And yeah, don't think that what you're doing is like insignificant because it's not.
That was pretty good on short notice there, James. Thanks for that one. Andrea, I'll come to you.
Okay, I think I can only advise everyone a little bit from the end of the career looking backwards is you keep curious, don't get frustrated, don't be frustrated to get out of your zone of comfort. It is not so comfortable, I can assure you, but it is when you then look back 1 or 2 years later, you will see how much it has enriched you and has given you new opportunities. I think that is, and frankly, if you are going with an open mind, you have some good skills of analyzing problems, you can contribute everywhere.
Thanks, Andre. Laura, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, for me, it's just keep a motivation high, believe in it, and you will make it because there is a space for you somewhere in a sustainability field out there. Whatever is the industry, the business, there is need. So believe in it. The advertisement will be later.
Sure.
Yeah.
I
Okay.
mean, you can do it now if you want.
No, it's let's close the tour.
Sure.
That was me. Yeah, I think that you can do personal projects that take like all these great public climate data sets and do a fun data science project with. If you're a physicist trying to make that transition, you can, and more importantly, like you can be in the environment that you are in now. And as Raluca said, like bring the conversation in about sustainability, make it like talking about the weather, because that's going to change like the culture of how, or it's contributing to changing the culture of how we all operate to like individually have each pod work as sustainably as possible, whether that's changing materials or changing ideas, and like asking yourself, why are you doing what you're doing? And understanding like what the end goals are and see if that fits into a sustainability framework.
Thanks, Lia. And Raluca?
Yeah, so maybe as Lia mentioned, I don't think there's a single correct path on having an active role in sustainability, because some people, as we know in this meeting, at least we have many people from different backgrounds. Maybe one can have the greatest impact by staying in the area that they are in. So let's say research, then in their day-to-day work, they can make science itself more sustainable, or in like let's say technology, computer science, it can make those kind of functionalities more sustainable. There are so many areas that we could improve at, as simple as a workflow that analyzes data. If it improve in performance, then there are less resources used. Therefore, with each kind of this kind of workflow, then it is reduced. So, well, I think there are so many areas in which we can implement sustainability. So even if you don't move specifically to a sustainability role, if you implement this in your professional work daily, and also in your personal life, like to have a discussion, then you don't really need something specific. So you don't have to wait a long time to let's say to be aware that you're making something that is sustainable. You can already do it now. And I think with each discussion, with each project that considers sustainability in its incipient stages, or even later in optimization, then the word goes by, and then somebody else can take that example and do the same. And then slowly but surely, hopefully, everybody's going to implement those. And if we don't know something, just recognize that you don't know and you don't understand, and ask or research or ask people who have a lot of knowledge, like Laura, for example, who knows a lot about sustainability, and so you can take that information and apply it to your specific area of expertise. That's what I'm trying to do, basically, also what I'm planning to do.
Thanks, Raluca. So did anybody have anything that they wanted to advertise to the audience before I do a huge round of thank yous and we bring the session to a close? Laura, you said you had something to add.
Yes, I would like to profit to advertise a couple of initiatives. So one is the CERN alumni group on sustainability. So if you were working at CERN, you can join the CERN alumni network. And inside the network, there are several groups. And a bit more than 1 year ago, we founded a group on sustainability topic. So you're welcome to join. We're organizing online events and in-person events. So the next one will be in September in Geneva. It's co-organized and hosted by the CERN Solar Club, together with us, Alumni Sustainability. And it will be the presentation of Ulisse project. So Ulisse project is a project for renewable energies in the Geneva Lake, so very close to CERN. If you're around, you're welcome to join. It will be on the 16th of September in the evening at 7 p.m. at CERN. So there is an Indico event on it, but maybe we can share the link later, I don't know. And the other initiative is an association which is promoting awareness around plastic production and plastic waste. This is very similar to the climate fresque that you may know. So this is a sort of a workshop where you get to know a specific topic. In the case of climate fresque, this is climate change, but be aware that we have also one about plastic, and it's called Fresque du Plastique in French. So if you want, there is a website, fresqueduplastique.org. And we also have a Swiss branch of it. So you can get in touch either with the Swiss or the French one to have a workshop at your place, or also online.
Thanks, Laura.
Thank you.
And we can certainly post. I'm sure that the links will get posted. Did anybody else have anything that they wanted to advertise? James?
No, nothing from me.
All good. Raluca?
So not really advertise in particular, but there are several positions, interesting positions, or even consultancy, short-term consultancies at the UN, specifically United Nations Environmental Program, in different areas, from administration to software, information systems, or legal. And one may find there's a position that they would like, even if it's short-term or long-term. I saw from time to time that the areas where one can work in, they can bring, let's say, results in the UNEP family and in the environmental strategy around the world, and that is a nice place to start. And then maybe I will offer this link, but there are e-learning courses on a lot of environmental topics of one of the UN platforms that I worked on, Informia. And there you can find anything from introductive courses, e-learning courses on different conventions, treaties, or subjects, pollution, for example, or mercury, and so on and so forth. And then one advice for me, because I got more knowledgeable about the multilateral environmental agreement since I started working at United Nations. There are many things that they are doing, and maybe I will offer a link with the most important ones, or the ones that I follow extensively, because there are so many efforts that are being made, and they usually advertise this on LinkedIn. And even just reading about those it is nice to be updated on because they're doing so much and they're trying to do even more year by year, and it's not easy with the current, let's say, political climate, environmental status. And sometimes they even have internships or full-time positions for people. And again, they have COP events, conference of the parties, that where they review all the actions by all the countries and the plans forward. So yeah, that's it from me.
Thanks, Raluca. And André, Lia, do you have anything that you'd like to advertise?
No, not at all.
Well, I mean, first of all, a huge thank you to our 5 panelists. We've made you work extremely hard. No doubt, at very high temperatures, locked in your offices with the door closed to avoid any disturbances. I don't think we can thank you enough for your thoughtful and lucid answers to all of these questions, and we really do appreciate the time that you've taken to join us today. So, with that, thanks again. Huge thank you to the organizers and to everybody for joining, and I'll pass back to our conference leaders to I guess give any announcements they have for the end of today. Thank you all.
Thank you, Peter, for moderating. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. And again, thanks again from us, the organizers, as well. This has been an absolutely fabulous panel, and we've really appreciated all of your inputs. So thank you very, very much. So the end of this panel does mark the end of day 2 of Sustainable HEP. So we will be asking all of the panelists to send us any of the links of the things they wanted us to advertise, and we will share those in various different aspects of the conference. Ultimately, that's the end of our afternoon. We come back tomorrow at 2 p.m. CEST for our final day of the conference, and we're very excited to welcome you to join us then tomorrow. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks.
Bye.